what exactly are we doing? As medical professionals, we're exhausted and enough is not being done about it. And in the interim, we're getting hurt. Hi, I am Dr. Judy Wright. I'm a physician and life balance and performance strategist. I'm a little triggered, and that's because last week I was watching something and a news segment came up, and it was about a nurse in Boston who was so tired that she drove off of the roof of a hospital. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, because I know burnout is a thing among medical professionals. It's a thing. And what else I know is that burnout can lead to people ending themselves. I was concerned. I thought to myself, did she basically try to end herself? So I listened. I listened, and that was not the case. She literally was exhausted. And in her exhaustion, in getting ready to move her car, after having worked a pretty long shift and deciding that her next shift was actually going to begin relatively soon in a few hours, decided that taking the time to drive home, try to wind down, get some sleep, and get up and come back really wasn't going to give her enough hours of rest. And so she decided what a lot of people decide. She decided to stay and sleep in her car. And somewhere along the line, she decided to move her car, exhausted. And instead of hitting the brake, she hit the gas and careened, broke through the parking lot fence because she was on the roof of the parking lot, broke through the railing, careened right off of the roof of the parking lot. Now, she lived, and I was very happy. I don't know this person. I was very happy to hear that she lives, because these stories, when you yourself as a medical professional, these stories can hit hard. And these stories can hit hard because we may have heard them before. We may have known someone that went through them. We may have been the someone that went through them. And so I didn't just want to, sometimes it's clickbait, right? When you see something. I didn't just want to go by that, so I started looking up the story from different media, and it was indeed true. And then I started looking at what other nurses were saying. And while many were appalled, what they weren't was shocked. They weren't shocked that something like this could happen and did happen. They weren't shocked as if they had never heard this before. They weren't shocked at all. And frankly, neither was I. There was a case where a family was suing, and I don't remember if it was this Iowa or Ohio, but It was, the family was suing the hospital. This was like the early 2010s, so maybe, 2012 or so. But the family was suing the hospital. And the reason they were suing the hospital was 2013, they were suing. Because in 2011, the mother of the family, she had 2 young children, she had a husband, she crashed on the way home, and it was after a 12-hour shift. And the thing is that she was working these back-to-back shifts. This was the argument that the family was making. She was working these back-to-back shifts, and she was stressed. Her husband says she was stressed because of the staffing shortage at the hospital. And because she was one of a few nurses in this shortage, a handful that could work in dialysis, she had been working back to back shifts. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that she was doing like 16 and 24 hours. That's not what I'm saying. But when you're one of the few, people are asking you, they're imploring you, could you please, the patience. And so she did it. But she was stressed out. And from the family's perspective, she was so exhausted at this time on her way home. She crashed and did not make it. And they were suing the hospital. So I just tell you, this happened in 2011. The suing was in 2013. And here we are in 2024. Does that mean that this rarely happens? It happens more often than people realize. Even for physicians, now I was going to look up a couple of cases that people may have talked about. And then I said to myself, why? You don't have to look up anything. You already know a story. You already know a situation with a physician because you were that physician. I was a resident, and this was in, I want to say 2002, I think. And I was a resident, and I had been on my OBGYN rotation, right? So that means there's going to be not just maternity care, all types of GYN care, but also some overnights where you're going to be delivering those babies. That's what OBGYNs do, right? And I was a family medicine resident, but I was going through my OBGYN rotation. And it had been a long, arduous night. So what did that look like as a resident? What that looked like was I had gone in and probably gotten to the hospital 5 something one morning. The hospital was, when you drive that early in the morning, maybe 30 minutes away, less traffic to deal with. That's why I said that, early in the morning. And so imagine I probably left my house at around 5 o'clock in the morning so I could get there about 5:30, round on the patients that I needed to know so that when we do rounds with the attending or the main physician at our teaching hospital, we could, talk about our patients, give them what we found out had happened overnight while we may have been gone, and, move forward. So what happened is that I probably was there for 5:30 in the morning, and I was going to be there overnight. Yeah, that means I was working from 5:30 in the morning, and I was going to work throughout the day, be there overnight, hopefully get some sleep, but that wasn't a guarantee at all. Because there are going to be babies to be delivered, and then go to through the next morning all the way through rounds. So that easily could mean I'm not walking out the door of the hospital till maybe 8, 9, 10. And so that's what happened. And that's over 24 hours. So now I'm driving home. I distinctly remembered I rolled down the windows, I had the music up, and I'm driving home. And now I'm not far from home. I have to turn a corner, drive down that one block, turn another corner. I would now be on my block. This is where I was. And somewhere along the line, I crashed the car. And I didn't see it coming. Why? Because I fell asleep at the wheel. I totaled my car that day. I totaled my car. I remember I was by another hospital that was close to where I live, and somebody that I recognized came to me. People got me out of the car. There was somebody in the car that I crashed into. He was in a park position. That means I bared off and hit the back of his SUV. I had a little tiny car. He was concerned about me as well. And it was all because I was sleep deprived. And they say that many people aren't far from their home when they get into their accident. And for me, I think my body realized, oh, I'm almost home. And my body just relaxed itself out. And in that short time that I fell asleep, I veered my car off, crashed into the back of an SUV, and luckily no one else was hurt. And that's what happened. And again, just like this woman who careened off of this roof, that story is not as abnormal as people would seem to think. Why do we do this to ourselves, right? And so we could say it's being done to us. I mean, after all, I was a resident, right? And there's do what you're supposed to do as a resident so you can finish your residency and move on to as a doctor, or perhaps not do well in your residency at all and not be able to finish and practice as an attending physician. And that's what it feels like. But there's a bigger part to it. I think that because I've had this conversation with other physicians and nurses. We are conditioned to be this way. And that's not necessarily a blame per se, but we are conditioned to be this way. We are conditioned that even after residency or the practicums in school, the first couple of years of work, we are conditioned to keep going regardless of our fatigue, whether our fatigue is physical or mental or emotional. We are conditioned to put that to the back and continue going because there are people who need to be taken care of. And it is true. There are people who need to be taken care of. No doubt whatsoever. But we are conditioned to just keep going, to put on the good face, the strong face. We have this to work through our own situation by not working on it at all because we have things to do. And there are people who need us. But we don't think necessarily about the fact that those people need us to be well in order to take care of them properly. So around 2011, the ACGME, which I believe is the Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education, instituted that first-year residents, medical residents, should not work more than 16 continuous hours a day. Now, for some people, particularly the medical people, they're like, yeah. But for some people, they're going to look at this and be like, wait a minute, that's a lot of hours, continuous. Continuous? Yeah, continuous. Because it was longer than that. And there was some kind of, discourse around this. And I'm going to tell you that some of this discourse came from our own. I don't think that this is, something that people don't understand. Sometimes when the previous generations of a thing, whether it be a generation of a society, generation of a profession, sometimes the previous generation will look at a situation and say, well, we did it. What's the big whoop? What's the big deal? So some of this discourse was around, well, they can't really get, because I remember this discourse even when I was in medical school and residency, and they were talking about putting limitations. Well, if you just get up and leave, you can't really get the full essence of what it means to take care of the patient through things. Oh, people just don't want to work. So some of that discourse was from the very people in the profession, but who may have been older, because we're conditioned that we need to be there. The medical profession, and physicians and nurses know this, is such that if other people don't come to, say, relieve you, you can be, I'm missing the word right now, but someone can look at you and say, you can't leave. Because if you leave and we don't have somebody, that's abandonment of the patient. And so that runs in your head. You don't want to abandon the patient. And so that includes, you could be very fatigued, even if they don't mandate, that's the word I'm looking for, mandate you to stay. You could be very fatigued. You could be at home and know you're very fatigued, but they need somebody and you go in because we're conditioned to do so. It seems very noble. That's what I can say. It seems very noble. And I'm not saying that it's not noble. These are called noble professions. What I'm saying is that it's not necessarily the best thing. When you are exhausted, physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted, less than great things can happen. Less than good things can happen. Let's face it. Bad things can happen. Like you can crash your car. You can get into an accident and not make it home to your family. You can careen off of the roof of the roof of a hospital or any roof for that matter. Now, these seem like very extreme things, right? And by right, so a car accident is not that extreme. That happens every day. Careening off a roof seems extreme, right? But let's talk on another level. Let's not talk about the accident that could get you extremely hurt. Let's talk about how being that exhausted, physically, mentally, emotionally, whichever, can affect you in your daily work, in your daily personal life. It can just affect you, and it can have dire consequences. From a professional standpoint, when you are a medical professional, you need to be on point. Your brain needs to be working. Some of the decisions you make need to be efficiently made. So they need to be quickly made and they need to be correct. And that means that the slowing of the brain function, because you're so exhausted, is not where you need to be. But when you are this exhausted, whether it be physically or it be emotionally or so, it can slow down your decision making and make it that much more difficult. Imagine your exhausted surgeon in the OR or your exhausted emergency medicine physician, right? Adrenaline can go a long way to help, but how long is that going to go on before your body is just, or your emotions are just, right? So that's one thing it can do. It can slow down your ability to think through a problem quickly, correctly, come up with the best solution at the moment to stabilize the situation. So this can affect your patients, but it can also affect your colleagues and you, because there are plenty of situations where you can put yourself in a dangerous situation because you weren't able to think fast. Another thing, and we've heard this time and time again, medical mistakes, medication mistakes from nurses, from physicians. And, you can say, well, checks and balances, one checks the others. So even if the physician wrote something and it was wrong, the nurse should be able to catch it. And what, okay, let's think back to this pandemic. This wasn't one person that was exhausted. This was a system of people exhausted. Multiple systems in healthcare exhausted, right? Which means it makes it that much more easy for someone to make a mistake and someone else to miss it. Again, that can be a humongous problem when it happens, and it has happened, right? It has happened. And sometimes there are things in the system that make it that much easier to happen. And when you're exhausted and you're just trying to get through the job, you can miss things because you're just trying to get through the job. And this is the normal part of the system anyway, right? Another thing that can happen, your relationships. You are exhausted. When you're exhausted, it is hard to appear happy, appear cordial. Sometimes it's even hard to be civil. It's easy to be irritable. And that takes a toll on your relationships. And that takes a toll on the relationships with patients, all right? That takes a toll on relationships with colleagues. That takes a toll on relationships at home that you feel should be safe. And sometimes you feel it's a little too safe, and they can get the brunt of what we're feeling when we're fatigued. And so even that. And then there's the things that you do every day that you take for granted. Maybe you forgot to lock something because you're so exhausted, so you forgot to lock your door. Or you just forget to do something that was basic but important. You know, it just, we're exhausted. And unfortunately, it's not just I was tired, I misplaced my keys. It can be I am tired and it's putting me in danger. What are we doing? What are we doing? There's work to be done. Absolutely, there's work to be done. But your first job has to be to take care of yourself. It has to be. I truly believe that your healthy community, your healthy society begins with having healthcare professionals who are healthy too, who are doing okay, who are not ignoring their wellness, who are not overworking themselves at the expense of their well-being. We have to be really careful about how we are doing our time. We have to be really careful about that. When you're giving so much over here and you're ignoring the other aspects of your life and you're ignoring getting appropriate rest, getting enough sleep. And I say it that way because one doesn't have to include the other. Taking the time to engage in self-care that is meaningful to you, that restores you and recharges you. It's super important. And so 3 things I feel you need to really start to look at. And the first thing is start to look at your health. And I don't just mean, okay, well, the blood work looks okay. You know, I did go to the doctor. The blood work looks okay. The blood pressure looks okay. You know, I'm at a good weight. All of that is important. All of it is important, right? But also, how have you been doing? How have you been feeling? How have you been doing mentally? How are your stress levels, right? Don't take for granted that you may feel stressed. And don't take that as, well, it is what it is. It just comes with the job. So much so that you don't even try to manage it. How is your relationship health? You may put a lot into this job, and for some people, their job is the thing, right? So a lot does go to their job. But if you took the time to be in a relationship and you feel it was worth it, why not put some time to it? Don't take for granted that relationship that that can just foster itself, it should be fine. We're in it. Oh, we're married. It should be lived together. It should be fine. You have children. Children need your attention. Children need your attention. And I don't care if you're a woman or if you're a man. Children need your attention. You know, you hear stories of people saying, my parents were married and we lived together. They did not get divorced. They were married for a good long time and they loved each other. But honestly, my dad was hardly ever around. He was always working. So that's why I'm saying that, because don't think I'm just saying this to women. I am saying this to men too. Children need your attention and deserve it. How is that relationship going? If you are putting so much into work and think we can have a relationship when I'm retired, you've already missed the boat. And time is one of those things you can't get back. And the children do not stay 3 years old forever. So when talking about balance, you want to talk about all of it. Become self-aware, become aware of how your well-being is, all of your well-being, whole well-being, not just what are my numbers, what is the blood pressure machine telling me, what is the lab results telling me, what is your body telling you? How are you feeling in your body? What is your emotions telling you? Because we're looking at whole health. The second thing I would say to do is make sure, some people work 3 days on, 3 days off, 7 days on, 7 days off, right? You make sure that in there you have time slated for self-care. So for instance, if you're one of those people that work 7 days on, 7 days off, I would definitely suggest that you make sure that you put in some self-care stuff on your days off. Now, you'd be surprised. You were saying, well, of course they're going to do that. No, that's not necessarily so. Are you putting in self-care stuff that is meaningful for you to recharge you in those 7 days? But also, there's little self-care things you can do during your 7 days on that may not be, okay, I'm going to go to the beach. Or it may not be that, but there are little things you can do throughout the day that gives you self-care that you need to help you recharge. If you're working 7 days on 12-hour shifts each day for 7 days, that's 84 hours that week. Yeah. Or if it's 8-hour shifts, that's 56 hours. And if you think that that's abnormal to hear that people work 7 days on and then 7 days off, it's not. You're like, that's more than 40 hours. Yeah, it's not that abnormal. Or even if you're a medical professional who is able to do some stuff from home, review labs and stuff like that. If you're able to review labs from home, now you're a person who's not only working out in the field, but you're also working from home. So the second thing I would say is make sure that you are gaining some self-care. So the first thing was understand how your whole health is doing, your whole well-being. And the second thing is make sure you engage in self-care. The third thing I would say, because this is very important, is your support system. Your support system at work, your support system at home, your support system on a professional level. Your support system is super important, right? Because the thing about a support system is that your support system can also be your accountability system to point out to you when you're doing a bit too much, and to sometimes remind you, right, that you are not put here to be. You were put here to bring wellness to others, but you were not put here to be superhuman. That if you know you feel exhausted, or you know you're doing things that can get you to the point of feeling exhausted, you need to acknowledge that and do something about it now. And also that you don't need to put yourself on, you don't need to, do all of these things and act superhuman and be above it all to prove anything to anybody. And if you are honest and to others, you'd be surprised how many people would be supportive of you. But then we can start to have these honest conversations about when too much is too much. See, the system is going to continue to roll. It's going to continue to roll. And as much as you let it get from you and take from you, it'll keep doing it. So you need to make sure that you are paying attention and taking care of yourself. I don't want to have to hear about, and I'm sure I will, but I don't want to have to hear about another one of us, another physician, another nurse, heck, another respiratory therapist. And I don't want to have to hear about another one of us driving off of something, crashing into something, burning out, burning down. Or even ending ourselves because we are physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted. It is time to not only acknowledge it, which I think happens, that they're acknowledging more what we're going through, and that more people are leaving because they're either leaving because they can't even do it anymore, or they're leaving before they get to that point. And now the people who are left have that much more on their shoulders. Yeah, I don't want to have to hear this continue to go on. So it's time that we prioritize our whole well-being, our whole wellness. Acknowledge we're exhausted and do something about it. If you were here this long, thank you. And I ask you to like, to subscribe, comment, and share. Share with another medical professional you know. We all have a common understanding of situations like this. We no longer want this to have to happen. It is time that we step forward for ourselves and for each other. In the end, everybody benefits from that. You benefit from it, your colleagues benefit from it, and the very people that you stick around for, that you keep going for, benefits from a well you. That's it. So, like, comment, subscribe, and share. And we'll talk next time.